Hi, this screencast will help you to prepare for My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. Please ensure that you have highlighters and pens ready and that you have access to the internet. Before we start, you should first listen to a reading of the poem, and on this screen you will also see a link to a short dramatization of the poem. It will be useful for you to both listen to and watch the dramatization. So pause now and do this, please. Please read through the poem yourself for a second time and then complete all the tasks shown on this slide. Pause and restart once you have completed all these activities. A good way into this poem is to think in general about this idea of love. And on this slide you will see lots of different types of love that are explored throughout the ages and in different texts. What I would like you to do now is to pause this slide and to create a mind map of all the words, images, symbols that you think explain what love is. Once you've done this, create your own definition of love using no more than 10 words. You should know by now how useful it is to know a little bit about the poet himself, and on this slide you will see a link to a website that will help you find out more about Robert Browning. And towards the end of this PowerPoint slide you will also see a sound clip that you can listen to that will be giving you information about the poet. To understand My Last Duchess, you absolutely need to immerse yourself into the world of the Duke. A couple of details just before we start looking at the poem is on this slide, very interestingly, that the original title of this poem was I, Italy. And I would like you to remember this fact and think about what the significance of this change of title could potentially be. The poem is set in Italy, in a place called Ferrara. This poem reflects Browning's interest in Italian politics in the late Middle Ages, also the time known as the Renaissance. The poem appears as one half of a conversation. The speaker is the unnamed Duke of Ferrara, a city-state in Lombardy, now the north of Italy. But Italy, as a unified state, was created only in the 19th century, long after Browning wrote his poem. In the Middle Ages, each city, with the surrounding country, was an independent realm with its own ruler. The listener is an envoy, a kind of diplomat and messenger. His master, Count, has sent him to negotiate the dowry for the marriage of the Count's daughter to the Duke, whose Last Duchess is the subject of his speech and of the poem. What do you know about Italy? Pause the slide for a few seconds and write down anything that you can think of about Italy as it was or as it is today. A short summary of the poem is as follows. We see an Italian Duke who is talking to a messenger from a wealthy Count. The messenger has come to bring an offer of marriage between the Count's daughter and the Duke. The Duke spends most of the dramatic monologue bragging about his wealth and aristocratic lineage. More disturbingly, he calmly relates how his previous wife, My Last Duchess, was disposed of because basically she had offended his vanity. He also tells us that while having her portrait painted, the Duchess revealed innocent qualities that irritated the Duke, so far that he chose to have her killed. His power seems absolute, and she is easily replaced. But the portrait by master painter is of far more value to the Duke, and he is pleased to show this off to his distinguished visitor. The critic Isabel Armstrong sums up the poem like this. The mad Duke cannot love without so possessing and destroying the identity of his wife that he literally kills her and lives with her dead substitute, a work of art. This poem is a dramatic monologue. As a chronicler of the incident in the development of a soul, Robert Browning often allowed a speaker's own words to reveal and condemn his or her own behavior. The Duke's monologue in My Last Duchess unveils his persona as courteous, cultured, and terrifying, as he describes a portrait of his late wife in stark detail. If you go to www.victorianweb.org, you will find a lot more useful information about Browning's use of the dramatic monologue. We will have a quick look at language and structure in this poem. Ostensibly, the Duke is polite, sophisticated, and controlled in his speech, and this makes it even more chilling when we discover the darkness below the surface. Both the language and the structure work together to help us gain an insight into his persona. The elevated language is the Duke showing off his educated side, that pictured countenance, meaning face, and your master's known munificence, meaning generosity. These are just two examples of his overwordy speech. Structurally, the fact that there are no stanza breaks and that the Count speaks uninterrupted for 56 lines points to a man who likes the sound of his own voice and is full of his own importance. The use of heroic rhyming couplets gives the poem a controlled structure which suits the dominating personality of the Duke. There is plenty of enjambment to allow the speech some fluency to mimic natural speech. The poem is full of controlled asides and deliberated digressions in mid-sentence, which effectively captures the pattern of natural speech, but which also gives us a picture of the Duke as a calm and reasoning person. This logical reasoning does not include any positive emotions, like love for another. The repeated use of pauses created by the dashes, the use of brackets, parentheses, the rhetorical questions, and the Duke's quoting and imagining of others' words gives us a picture of a highly logical and calculating mind. For example, a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad, and but thanked, somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked. Similarly, very long and multi-clausal sentences and deliberately unusual word order, for example, I know not how, show off the Duke's education and his arrogance. So in lines 5 to 13, 13 to 21 and 48 to 53, we see single sentences, unusual word order, so not the first, are you to turn and ask thus. This all makes the Duke sound like a pompous and conceited snob, which he is. His comment that he has no skill in speaking is clearly false modesty on his part. Even had you skill in speech, which I have not. This controlled section of his speech itself, ironically, demonstrates clearly that he does have such skill. The sophistication of the Duke's syntax and the elevated diction, vocabulary, reflect the Duke's feelings of superiority. This calm and reasoned style contrasts with the sycophantic tendencies lurking beneath the surface and the irrationality of killing his wife on the basis of her having a heart too soon made glad by anything, for example the white mule, rather than solely by himself. The use of cheerful rhyming couplets contrasts ironically with the subject matter of murder, and the politeness and gentility of the Duke's language is very ironic, giving his dark actions, sir, repeated 4 times in the poem, will it please you sit, and will it please you rise, add to the ironically polite tone. Browning opens with the Duke's words to his guest. He explains why he has named the painter and that the portrait is kept behind a curtain which he alone is permitted to draw back. And when he does this, he notes how the viewer is curious but perhaps frightened to ask about the thing that puzzles him. We see that his visitor is not the first to ask in this way. So, what is it that the viewer sees? It is a spot of joy in the cheek of the Duchess. The Duke tries to imagine what the painter said that would cause this slight reaction. The Duke does not object to the artist showing such courtesy, but he thinks his wife should be more dignified and not so easily impressed. Specifically, he faults her for finding equal pleasure in 4 things, as if they are not at all of equal value. He faults her specifically for the following 4 things. He says that she was too soon made glad by, firstly, his favour at her breast, which is either a reference to their lovemaking or merely to the Duke's approval of her appearance. He talks about the dropping of the daylight, meaning sunset, and the gift of fruit from an unnamed courtier, and finally the white mule that she rode. The Duke accepts that it was good for her to show gratitude, but bad that she ranked anybody's gift with his giving her his family name, which he refers to as my gift of a 900 years old name. The Duke considers the possibility of explaining to her why she was wrong. He notes that he lacks the skill and speech to make his will quite clear to such an one. But anyway, he would not try even if he had the skill, because this would be a loss of dignity, some stooping, and he tells us clearly that I choose never to stoop. Instead, he let her carry on for a while. This grew, and then we see the very chilling I gave commands. We are not told what the commands were, but can work them out from the result. This appears in three things. The statement that all smiles stopped. This may at first seem ambiguous, and we think it is because she had reason to be serious or unhappy. Then we realize that the Duke means that all smiles and everything else stopped for the Duchess. The repeated statement of the Duchess in the painting stands as if alive, but she isn't. The sequel, the Duke needs or wants a wife, and is arranging his next marriage. He praises the Count's known generosity while stressing that it is the wife, rather than the dowry, that he really wants. The poem's ending recalls its beginning, as the Duke points out another treasure. A bronze sculpture of Neptune, the Roman god of the sea, called Poseidon by the Greeks, taming a seahorse. This is like the start of the poem, but it is also quite unlike it. Frau Pandorf's masterpiece is a portrait of a real person to whom the Duke was married, yet she is never named, only identified by her relation to the Duke. Klaus's bronze is of a fantastic, remote and mythical subject, yet to the Duke they may seem of equal value, since he mentions them in the same breath. This poem is full of ambiguity and irony. In this poem we see that the relationship between appearance and reality is very important, between what things seem and what they really are. On the surface it is an account of a polite negotiation between two noblemen, enlivened by the host's decision to show his privileged guest a masterpiece by the great portrait painter, something few visitors would be allowed to see. Notice that the portrait is not in a public area but upstairs. At the end of the poem the Duke speaks of going down, and to recount something of its subject, his previous wife. Beneath the surface it is a terrible story of ruthless and despotic power, of the Duke's disapproval of the natural and innocent behaviour of his naive wife, who does not know the value of his great name. We are less sure about the artist. Does Frau Pandorf know or care about these things? And equally we are unsure how the listener, the Duke's honoured guest, feels about what he hears. The audio file on this slide, which you can access through the PowerPoint, will give you a lot more information about the poem and the poet. On these slides you will see links to more useful information about the poem, and please make use of these particular links. And finally, on this slide you will see the links to the BBC Learning Zone, which again includes a host of very useful clips that will help you to gain a full understanding of this poem.